The Paul Leslie Hour, helping people tell their stories. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. I'm joined by Orange Kellin. He's a performing and recording artist, a clarinetist. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
A pleasure is all mine.
Tell all the listeners out there, where in the world are you right now?
I'm in New Orleans, right in the middle of the French Quarter.
And this is where you live?
This is where I live. Yes, in the vortex of jazz life in the French Quarter.
And what is it like living in the French Quarter of New Orleans?
Well, to tell you the truth, things aren't things ain't what they used to be, like the song says, and nothing is. When I came here, it was a neighborhood where people lived. A lot of, artistic type people, painters, writers, musicians, and alternative lifestyle people. Now it is turned into a kind of a Disneyland. It's basically geared all to tourists, and there are not that many people living here permanently anymore. Like services for normal people hardly exist in the French Quarter anymore. So it feels a little bit like living in the middle of Disneyland. But I've been here so long. I've been in this very house for 40-some years. And so I still think of it in some way the way it used to be. But I mean, it's still charming. It's beautiful old buildings and a very charming area, but it isn't really geared to full-time living, I would say, anymore.
And what is it like for you when you're living there and it's the Mardi Gras season?
Well, it's gearing up now, and next weekend it'll be mayhem here on my corner. It will just be wall-to-wall screaming, dancing, loud music from speakers pulsating out into the street, and half the people are drunk, and the other half are even more drunk. And this goes on for a solid week of spilling over into Monday and Tuesday. And Tuesday is the climax, and then come Ash Wednesday, everything is dead quiet. It's like the whole party is over. But don't try to rest or anything. If you live here in my corner, which is near the corner of Bourbon and St. Philip Street, it's just noisy day and night that weekend.
I guess so. And have you come to appreciate the types of cuisine that they make? The styles of cooking?
Of course. The styles of cooking, of course. That's part of the charm of living here. The cooking is extraordinary. I mean, on many levels. And I mean, a lot of people come here for the cooking, not for the music. It's a foodie's paradise, and it's wonderful. I mean, you could easily overdo it, and I do it.
Hoping you can tell us more about you. Where are you from originally?
Sweden. I was born in Sweden, and Stockholm was my hometown. And I came here a little over 50 years ago, and I've been living in New Orleans and also in New York since then. I always had my place here in New Orleans the whole time. And in late 70s, I came up to New York with this show one more time that was very successful. So I got an apartment in New York in that period, and I've actually held on to that apartment even to this day. So I've spent long periods in New York doing all kinds of things, starting with that show, but then later on other things.
And when you decided to move to the United States, was that a scary thing?
Well, I didn't decide to move to the United States. I came here, I took a little break from university for a pilgrimage to catch what I thought was a tail end of real New Orleans jazz. That's in 1966, with all the first generation jazz players or second anyway, still alive and kicking and playing well. I came here in October 1966. I wasn't totally unknown because I'd made a few records with a band we had as teenagers in Sweden, 3 EPs, in fact, and so some people knew of it. And I came here, I was maybe within a month, I was offered to make a recording session with all the old-timers, Preservation Hall type musicians. And the recording company put me in the union, and from that I started getting a few job offers and other recording offers. And so my little pilgrimage, I thought it was going to be a few months. I thought I'd be home for Christmas. I kept extending and extending and extending. And I came back to Sweden for the first time 6 years later on tour with the New Orleans band. And at that point, and I got back to Sweden, I realized I actually was not living in Sweden anymore. I thought I was on this like kind of a, temporary thing in New Orleans. But I realized then that I was actually living full time in the United States. So anyway, that was the story of my beginnings here. I didn't come with intent to stay or to immigrate. I came here for a visit that extended into a whole other life.
So how does a Swedish guy get interested in New Orleans jazz?
Just like anybody else. Sweden is connected to the civilized world. There's radio, television, movies, records, all these media that are spreading the word of jazz since the 1920s or even the teens, also came by Sweden. So Sweden, was as aware of what's going on in New Orleans as anybody elsewhere, let's say, like in the United States. Like somebody in Minnesota would have the same idea of what's happening in New Orleans like somebody in Stockholm, So thanks to the modern world.
What is it, if you could put it into words, that you like about this style of music?
Oh, well, this style of music, I think that the subject of why you start liking something or not is pretty mysterious. Why do some people take to a certain style of anything or not? And I don't think it's as simple as, parental influences. A lot of people hate what their parents like, and other people love it. So it's almost like it's a love at first sight, I think. You hear it, you think, oh, this is fantastic, and then you just like it, and you might hear something else, and it leaves you cold. Why it is, I don't think anybody can tell you. I remember the first time I heard like maybe jazz was sort of in the air, when I was a kid in the 50s. So you could hear on the radio and people playing it on records. You went to a party, there would be some kind of jazz playing. And I remember seeing the Benny Goodman story when I was like 12 or something, and thought, oh, it was fantastic. It was a wonderful sound in the clarinet. And I just thought then, I didn't want to play the clarinet. I also remember when I first consciously heard like real New Orleans jazz, and I was maybe 15. There was a program on the radio, and they played this record from the American music record label, which Bill Russell was a creator of. It was just a 4-piece band, and I was taught to the floor. I thought it was unbelievably good. Why, I don't know, but it was just hit a spot. And then I started searching out more of that kind of stuff and find out other people, the young musicians, that like to play it, and they formed a little band and that kind of thing, like people used to back in those days.
So you mentioned Benny Goodman.
Right.
Past and present, who are some of the clarinetists who have impressed you?
Well, I mean, I moved on from very good, and I discovered there's a lot more to the world of clarinet, and so many great players. I guess I was particularly enamored of the so-called New Orleans Creole school of clarinet playing, like Jimmy Noon, Albert Nicholas, Ormus Simeon, all kinds of names. I liked all the New Orleans stuff. I liked all kinds of players, in fact, but to limit it, shouldn't really limit it New Orleans like that. But that was really my first love was that, and also liked all these soulful type New Orleans players like Johnny Dodds and all the big names. I soaked it all in.
I was talking on email with our mutual friend, Connell Fowkes.
Oh, yes.
The great Connell Fowkes. And he had many kind words to say about you.
Oh, well, I have many kinds of words to say about him. Wonderful player, wonderful person, and I enjoyed every moment playing with him.
How did you come to meet him?
Well, he had moved. I was in New York already. This is my New York period. We were working on a new show. I needed a piano player that had certain capabilities. I would be a good reader and had a good feel for vintage jazz. Then one of the players in the band, Eddie Davis, who I believe you also have talked to, he recommended, there's this new guy in town who's playing around, and he recommended him, and he came and I don't know if he auditioned, maybe I tried out to rehearse, I don't remember exactly how he did, but it was at love at first listening. He was just totally right in every respect. And so after that show, we started playing other gigs, and all kinds of things happened after that, basically, including all the way up to One More Time show on Broadway, and then touring around the States and Europe and that kind of thing.
For people who perform this type of music, would you say that it's almost like fraternity?
Yeah, I would say it probably is. But I wouldn't say fraternity, and I would exclude the sisters. There's both boys and girls, and there's both musicians and aficionados. So it isn't limited to a fraternity. I mean, it's a coterie, maybe. I don't know what the word is, but it's young and old. It's men and women, young and it's all different nationalities. You tend to, maybe if you don't know people personally, but you tend to be aware of people. I wouldn't say not even nearly everyone. You're aware of a lot of them.
What musician that you have worked with have you been the most in awe of?
Oh, wow. That's a big subject. It's a big subject because, I play with some of the, most famous and greatest musicians that are now dead and gone, that will just take your breath away, like Earl Hines. I made a recording session with him for 3 days, and it was like totally breathtaking. I played with a festival with Teddy Wilson, the piano player, and some of the other, like Zudith Singleton, George Brunis. Not to mention a few, names on the all-around circuit, but also many great New Orleans-based musicians that didn't really travel outside of New Orleans much. And other names, like Jabbo Smith, who was like a genius. That's just some of the old timers. And there are many young musicians that I'm totally blown over by as well, that people my age, or even younger than myself, that, loved every moment playing with them. Like in New York, there was a bunch of people there. There was a nice clique of musicians that I really loved playing with. if you start mentioning names, I'm afraid I'm going to forget somebody and maybe insult somebody by not mentioning it. It's very hard to single some people out and then not mention others, And then for me, the list is big.
What do you think of the playing of Ken Poplawski?
Oh, I love his playing. He's a fabulous musician. I haven't really played anything much with him. I don't think. I mean, when I played on a jam session or something, but I mean, I heard him like an audience member, but I don't remember having actually worked with him at any point. So if you work with somebody, you have another dimension, to your knowledge of a musician.
What do you think of the playing of Woody Allen?
Woody Allen, he's a very passionate player. I mean, he is. You can tell that he believes what he's doing and he's really into it. And there's basically playing out of pure love for the music.
I'm hoping you can tell the listeners some of your all-time favorite records.
Well, that's like the question of, was the Desert Island record. I would have to start chronologically, I guess. King Oliver Creole Jazz Band is a must. There's so much to be learned from that. General Morton's Red Hot Peppers. And there's so much to be learned from that. I mean, those are records that will never die. I mean, I don't know how much I want to go on, but I would say from a traditional jazz perspective, those are maybe the fundamental records. But you can go on, Charlie Parker's Dial Session or the Artie Shaw's, early big bands or that kind of thing, but as more profile as a New Orleans style player, so I was probably limit myself to that for this interview.
Now, as far as other genres of music,
right?
Do you like or listen to other things other than jazz?
Yeah, there's all kinds of, like folk music, like early Brazilian folk music, choros and, Martinique folk music. But I haven't made a study of any of it. It's just, all kinds of stuff I like to listen to. But I haven't lived it like I have New Orleans jazz.
Do you compose music?
I would say no. I mean, I have written a few tunes and all that, but I wouldn't say wouldn't call myself a composer. No. There's really not much outlet for what I'm doing for original material.
Tell the listeners about the first time you went to Preservation Hall.
Oh wow, yeah, I do remember that pretty well too. That was in October 1966, and I had been waiting all day for it to open. I was so looking forward so much to get to hear live New Orleans jazz in New Orleans, and I was totally blown over. The first thing that struck me was the rhythm. How different the rhythm. I'm not talking about just the rhythm section. I'm talking about the rhythm that everybody had. There's a certain feel, a certain rhythm. You don't quite get it listening to records as you do when you heard it live. And it was like an explosion. And it was so powerful. At the same time, it was so relaxed. And it was so happy at the same time as it was sad. It was all this mixture. It was a total explosion in my life. But I would say rhythm was number one. The rhythm, or the groove, I guess a modern word for it is. The groove was really what struck me most of all.
Do you find that New Orleans is a good place for a musician to live?
I do. I think it is. I think there's probably more live music per capita in New Orleans than anywhere else, including New York City. There's a lot of live music going on. It's like it's all over the place. But there's 10 million people in the New York area. And the New Orleans area is 300 or maybe 400 if you include the distant, satellite cities. It's a small town. But in restaurants and music, it's a big town. And I meet all these musicians, young and old, ask them how they're doing. Everybody's doing great, and everybody's working. Everybody's making a living. And maybe nobody's getting rich, but they're making a living. Some people are buying houses, and they're buying cars, and maybe have a family, have a kid or two. And I was living in New York for a number of years, and so many musicians were just living hand to mouth, and nobody really could afford to buy anything. And there was more of a struggle than it is in New Orleans. And the equation is more in the musician's favor. I guess the one aspect of New Orleans living is it's, compared to New York, for instance, or maybe other big metropolitan areas, like the housing is cheaper. To rent an apartment is much cheaper than it is in other big cities in the States. But for musicians, there's also a lot more outlet for playing. Things have changed since I first started playing. When I started playing, it was almost everything was union that I did. There was lots and lots of non-union work, but I was in the union, so I played union work, and it was enough to keep me happy, working, maybe 10 gigs a week, probably. That average 10 gigs a week. And the musicians now, there's a whole lot of playing for the door, as they call it. But you get a piece of the bar, or you pass the tip bucket, or you sell CDs, and put all that proceeds in the pot, and you split the take, and they end up making, as much as the union guys do, or maybe more. And everybody's working all the time. I'm not particularly in favor of playing for the door because I'm an old timer, I guess. I think people should get a living wage, I guess you call it, not play for tips, not depend on tips. Just like a restaurant worker, I think, should be able to count on a living wage, and tips are, on the side. But anyway, that's not how it works. The modern economy, people work for tips and that kind of stuff, But it seemed to work out for musicians, and everybody seemed to be happy. There's also a very lively street scene in New Orleans. You see people play the streets and the squares and all the time. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not. But
what has being a musician taught you about people?
What being a musician taught me about people?
Yeah.
Humanity or audiences in general. There is something about people as an audience. But, there is a mass thing going on. I used to, these shows in a lot in New York, and also traveling around touring with them in London and all that kind of stuff. And ask the question, talk about audience. But one thing about the audiences are that, like, every audience seems to have a personality, and it's like different city, or especially a different country, there's a certain personality for that country. The reactions tend to be certain things they do in that. I say in Italy, for instance, they will start clapping and yelling, "Bravo, bravi!" Clapping in the middle of a song or in the middle of a performance. It's kind of nice. I don't mind it at all. And here, if you play in England, there's not a sound. They say, "Oh shit, really bombing here tonight." Not too much even after the songs, but after the whole performance, they'll stand up and scream and give a standing ovation, and they have loved it. Meanwhile, they've been also polite. So coming from America, it's unusual. I'm used to American audiences much, but even there are differences depending on age bracket, perhaps, depending on venue. But they tend to act as one. Or this is so like the mass thing going on. People leap to their feet as one, or they don't as one. And there's also certain, you get the sort of feel of communicating. You can also, sometimes you can even tell if they can hear well. And like if there's something is off with the sound, you can tell in the reaction from the audience. Now, as far as we're talking about people in general, I would say not so much, because if you meet people as individuals, like say after a show, there are times we've done a show and part of the gig is you have to go out and sign records afterwards and talk to the people. It sounds like might be a drag, but most of the time it isn't. It can be quite interesting. But then people come up and talk, and it varies with the age group, how people talk to you, what they say. Older folks will probably tell you about the grandkids, which may have limited interest to yourself, but as the main interest in their life is that, that kind of thing.
What is the best thing about being Orange Kellin?
Oh, what's the best thing about it? Well, I would say I consider myself pretty lucky guy, and I've been able to do a lot of what I wanted to do. I never thought I could do. When I came here, I had no ambition or even hopes that I would be able to make a living playing music. But deep down, that's all I ever wanted to do. So for that reason, I found myself very lucky that I came here and things turned out well in my career. So if I had to do it again, I would do the same thing again.
You and I were discussing a song at one point, an old song.
Oh, yeah. Wait, I got through all this. Was that your talk?
Yeah.
You want to play that?
Yeah, an a cappella performance.
Okay. Let me see if this works. I'll check my hearing aid. Okay. Don't say anything again. No.
Thank you.
Was that enough?
That was great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Or was it too much?
It was good. Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, until next time.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Paul Leslie Hour is hosted, produced, and written by Paul Leslie for Lifestyles Entertainment. For information, visit thepaulleslie.com. Thank you for being with us. Until next time.